All right, how's everybody doing today? Hotep, hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, writer, and historian. So it is Tuesday, November 1st, 2022, and we are live. So I wanted to come on and talk about this event in history, the Ocoee Massacre of November 2nd, 1920. And this was probably the worst day of election day violence in this country, probably the most deadliest day of election day violence in this country. And even though there were not as many people involved in this massacre as there was in the January 6, 2021 insurrection, you had about approximately 50 African Americans who were killed. Okay. This took place in Florida, in Ocoee, Florida, November 2nd, 1920. So we're right around the time of the year where this is the 102nd commemoration of the Ocoee Massacre of 1920. And you had white supremacists who were trying to keep African Americans from voting, our political power. They feared our political power. Okay. Also, I'll let you about the online classes that I teach, because as soon as I finish this broadcast, we're going to teach another installment of my online class, From the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. I teach that on Tuesdays, normally 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then on Wednesdays, I teach Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. So we have information in the thread of this broadcast, so you can register for those classes. So we're going to look at a few different articles here. This one is from the Zen Education Project, November 2nd, 1990, the Ocoee Massacre. Now, here's a picture of Julius July Perry. Julius July Perry. He was a very important African-American man in the community there in Ocoee, Florida. He was one of the ones who was killed. Okay. Now, in response to an attempt by African Americans to exercise their legal and democratic right to vote, at least 50 African Americans were murdered in a brutal massacre in Ocoee, Florida on November 2nd, 1920. On November 2nd, 1920, in what's called the Ocoee Massacre of 1920. Okay, the Ocoee, Florida Massacre, or Ocoee Massacre of 1920. So they go through and give a brief description of what happened. Okay, and this brief description comes from Ocoee on Fire. Ocoee on Fire, the 1920 Election Day Massacre. A quiet Florida citrus town became the scene of a gruesome racial cleansing that purged the entire Black population for over 60 years. Because there was about 500 African Americans approximately that were ran out of town, left homeless. Okay, but behind this massacre. So now it's important to understand also the timing of this, the timing of what happened. Okay, 1920 was 2 years after World War I ended. Okay, ends in 1918. And then in 1919, you have the Red Summer of 1919, where you have you have about 25 major race riots in this country. And African American men, World War I, came back home, and they were saying, we're not going to take the same racism and segregation and things like this we were dealing with before we left. Okay, before we went to the war, they were saying, we want all of our rights now. We want first-class citizenship, all of our rights now. Okay, Now you have a increase. You have an increase in the uh, numbers of Ku Klux Klan members also, and a lot with the movie The Birth of a Nation, which debuted February 8th, 1915. So you had a resurgence of Ku Klux Klan, and that movie showed the Ku Klux Klan as the heroes that saved white America from Negroes, from a Negro rebellion. Okay, this is the reason up here. This article here deals with some history dealing with the Red of 1919. This is an article from history.com. History.com is the official website of the History Channel. Red Summer of 1919, how Black World War I vets fought back against mobs. Red Summer 1919, how Black World War I vets fought back against racist mobs. When dozens of brutal race riots erupted across the U.S. in the wake of World War I and the Great Migration. Okay, so the Great Migration basically starts in 1915, and it's 1915 to 1970. And you have about 6 million African Americans migrating from the South up north and out west. All right. When dozens of brutal race riots erupted across the U.S. in the wake of World War I and the Great Migration, Black veterans stepped up to defend their communities against white violence. Black veterans, Black World War II veterans, stepped up to defend their communities against white violence. Okay, so there were race massacre. There were race riots in like Chicago, Elaine, Arkansas. You have them across the country in 1919, the year after World War I ends. Okay, so now this is the year before the Ocoee Massacre of 1920 happens. Okay, this is the year before the Ocoee Massacre of 1920. All right, now, if you go back to the article from the Zen Education Project. So on November 1st, 1920, and also it's important to note, this was the first election that women had the right to vote also, because of the 19th Amendment of 1920, which guaranteed the right to vote for women. So that's taking place at this time as well. Okay, so on the day before Election Day, November 1st, you had Ku Klux Klansmen wearing white robes, and they were carrying crosses, and they paraded through the streets of two African American communities in Ocoee, Florida, late into the night. With megaphones, they warned not a single Negro will be permitted to vote. Not a single Negro will be permitted to vote. And if any of them dared to do so, there would be dire consequences. Okay. So you have these white supremacists going into the African American community, threatening them the day before Election Day, telling them not a single Negro will be permitted to vote. And if any of you dare to vote, there will be dire consequences. Okay, that's voter suppression. That's voter intimidation. Now, November 2nd, Election Day came, and at least some African Americans did attempt to vote in Orange County, Florida. However, none were permitted to enter their respective polling places. White enforcers camped out around the centers, and poll workers were given instructions to deflect their attempts. Now, right now in Arizona, you have white supremacists out there who are armed, who are there observing people early voting, okay, and taking pictures of people taking pictures of people early voting, things like this, okay. This is reminiscent of what was taking place after, well, one, during Reconstruction, but especially after Reconstruction ends, okay. If we look at this article here from, this is from the Yahoo News, picked up from the Associated Press. Let me go over to this one right here. This is from Yahoo News, picked up from the Associated Press. All right. How's everybody doing? Share this broadcast at social media platforms. As soon as I'm done with this broadcast, we're going to teach our Tuesday night online history class from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. Okay. And visit our website, TheAHNHistoryNetwork.com, TheAHNHistoryNetwork.com, because you can register for the class there, as well as our Wednesday night class, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Okay, so now this article is from October 31st, 2022. Feds concerned about armed people at Arizona ballot boxes. Feds concerned about armed people at Arizona ballot boxes. This is an article that Yahoo News picked up from the Associated Press, Monday, October 31st, 2022. So this is, history may not repeat itself, but it definitely rhymes. It definitely rhymes. Reports of people watching ballot boxes in Arizona, sometimes armed or wearing ballistic vests, raised some concerns about voter intimidation. The Department of Justice, or the Justice Department, said on Monday, October 31st, 2022, as it stepped into a lawsuit over the monitoring. The statement from the Department of Justice comes days after a federal judge refused to bar a group from monitoring the outdoor drop boxes in the suburbs of Phoenix, Arizona. Threats, intimidation, and coercion are illegal under the Federal Voting Rights Act, even if those acts don't succeed, the government's attorneys wrote. While lawful poll watching can support transparency, quote, ballot security forces, end quote, present a significant risk of voter intimidation, the court documents state. The court documents go on to say, while the First Amendment protects expressive conduct and peaceable assembly generally, it affords no protection for threats of harm directed at voters, end quote, U.S. government attorneys wrote. Now, the filing runs counter to a judge's order on Friday, that was Friday, October 25th, U.S. District Court Judge Michael Liburdi, Liburdi, found the allegations present, quote unquote, serious questions, but it wasn't clear they were a quote unquote true threat to specific people or groups, and barring them could violate the watcher's freedom of speech. Now, U.S. District Court Judge Michael Liburdi is a Trump appointee and a member of the Federalist Society, a conservative legal organization. And the Federalist Society were one of the two main organizations that provided a list to then President Donald Trump of Supreme Court nominees as well as federal judge nominees. That was the Federalist Society and the Heritage Foundation. Now, the Arizona Alliance for Retired Americans is appealing the order in the swing state of Arizona, with several closely contested races this year. Okay, now this is the voter intimidation that's going on right now, which is reminiscent of what was taking place in the similar to what was taking place in the 1870s, 1860s, 1868 Opelousas Massacre. Okay, all this is reminiscent of the January 6, 2021 insurrection, and Trump racialized the results of the 2020 election when he said there was fraud in the elections in Detroit, Atlanta, Georgia, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin. All four of those cities have very large African-American populations. Detroit is 80% African-American where I live. So Trump racialized this, okay? All right, now let's go back to November 2nd, 1920, 102 years ago, and look at the voter intimidation that took place then, the voter suppression that took place then. White enforcers camped out around the centers, and poll workers were given instructions to deflect their attempts, to deflect the attempts of African Americans to vote. One by one, would-be African American voters were turned away either by threats of violence or by poll workers, who found their names mysteriously absent from the voter registration rolls. Oh, so you mean their names were purged? That's what we call that today. Their names were purged, like in George, from the voter rolls. Pollsters instructed these African Americans to get documentation from Notary Public R.C. Bigelow to verify that they were indeed registered to vote. Conveniently, however, Notary Public R.C. Bigelow was unable to be located because he was out on a fishing trip that day. He's out on a fishing trip on election day. Okay. With little other option, most of these African Americans returned to their homes without casting their ballots. Now, Moses Norman, also known as Mose Norman, would not be so easily deterred. After being turned away that morning in his Ocoee precinct, and there were going to be some African Americans who early in the day were able to vote, but then other ones are not going to be able to vote, especially those that come later in the afternoon are not going to be able to vote. Now, after being turned away that morning in his Ocoee, Florida precinct, Moses Norman rode to Orlando, Florida to seek the counsel of Judge John Chaney. Judge John Chaney. The attorney instructed him to write down the names of any African Americans who were not permitted to vote, and also the names of the poll workers who had denied them their constitutional right based upon the 15th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. Now, Judge John Chaney said a lawsuit against the county there in Florida could be brought to contest this violation. Okay, a lawsuit could be brought to contest this violation. All right, let's see. Give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like on this broadcast. Now, Mose Norman returned to Ocoee, Florida with these instructions, along with a handful of African-American citizens, again seeking to vote, because they understood the power of the vote. And also they had to pay a poll tax as well. They had to pay a poll tax, which meant that was a tax that they had to pay to register to vote. African Americans, because they instituted this in Florida as a means, as an obstacle to the 15th Amendment. All right. Now, also something very important to note, because Florida has a deep, rich history of of voter suppression. Okay, Florida has a deep history of voter suppression, and Florida is a former Confederate also. All right, now when we look at, let me see here. Let me pull this up. In 1868, the Florida State Constitution. I want to show you something else because I dealt with some of this on the African History Network show a couple of Sundays ago. In 1868, Florida writes their state constitution. Now, this is during Reconstruction. Okay, Reconstruction is 1865, 1877. In the class I teach on Tuesday evenings, we deal with the Civil War and the Reconstruction era, things like this, right? This piece here from the Brennan Center for Justice. Let me pull this up. History of Florida's felony disenfranchisement provision. History of Florida's felony disenfranchisement provision. And we know it was in 2018 that Amendment 4 passed in Florida with about 65% of the voters voting for it, 65% approval, Amendment 4, and this restored the right to vote to ex-offenders, okay? But then the Florida State Legislature, controlled by Republicans, they then passed another law that stated that you had to pay all your fees and things like this to try to put another barrier in the way of these ex-offenders being able to vote, okay? So all this ties into racism. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race, which comes out of the ideology of European white supremacy. All this ties into racism. All this deals with a fear of African Americans having power, political power, economic power, etc. All right. So if we look at this, this is from the Brennan Center for Justice, History of Florida's Felony Disenfranchisement Provision. All right. The constitutional provision disenfranchising people with felony convictions was originally enacted in the aftermath of the Civil War in 1868 as one of several tools to suppress the votes of newly freed slaves. So I was on the Tammy Mack show on the Fox Soul TV network on Monday, October 3rd. And the topic we were dealing with was, is it time to get over slavery? Is it time for African Americans to get over slavery? And I was on with on the panel with two Black conservatives who were ignorant of history. And they were saying it's time to get over slavery and this and that. And one of them said African Americans don't deserve reparations because there were Black people who owned slaves. In 1830, African Americans owned less than 1% of the slaves. We own about 6/10 of 1% of the slaves in America. Out of 2 million, African Americans own about 13,000. And at least half of those were probably family members that we bought out of slavery. Okay. This is the mentality of a lot of Black conservatives. They use that as an excuse to say, oh, African Americans don't deserve reparations. They skip over the 90% plus of the slaves that were owned by white people. They skip over all that and focus on less than 1% that African Americans owned. But what we see after slavery ends are laws put in place to regulate the movements of African Americans, like Black codes. But also we see laws put in place to disenfranchise us as well and lock us out of voting. So we're going to see obstacles to us voting even before the 15th Amendment is ratified and adopted in February of 1870. So even before the 15th Amendment is adopted in 1870, we see Florida doing this in 1868. Okay. Now let me try to zoom in on this. Okay. I'll just scroll back and forth, left to right. So I want to make sure everybody sees this. The constitutional provision disenfranchising people with felony convictions was originally enacted in the aftermath of the Civil War in 1868 as one of several tools to suppress the votes of newly freed slaves. 100 years later, in 1968, the provision was reenacted despite its history of discrimination and its continuing racially disparate effects. Felony disenfranchisement has long been used to diminish the voting power of Florida's African American population, and the law continues to have that effect. Okay, now Florida was one of 4 states where you lost your right to vote forever if you were convicted of a felony. Okay, Florida was one of there were 4 states where you lost your right to vote forever if you were convicted of a felony. Okay, and let me see, I'll give you those other states here also, because I know I have it here. Let me see, I'll find it because I have a bunch of notes on this here. Just a second, where was that? Oh, Kentucky, Iowa, and Virginia. Kentucky, Iowa, and Virginia. Okay, there's an article from Time Magazine that has, I have a bunch of information on this. Okay, so here's why Florida feared African Americans voting. Okay, pay attention to this. Blacks were disproportionately disenfranchised. This line right here. Blacks were disproportionately disenfranchised under the new provision of 1868 in the Florida State Constitution because state policies at the time were designed to control newly freed slaves through the criminal justice system. Okay. In 1865, 3 years prior, same year that the 13th Amendment is ratified, December 6, 1865, which legally ends chattel slavery. In 1865, the Florida legislature enacted black codes as a way to control black freedmen, the former slaves. This is why we need to stop referring to ourselves as descendants of slaves, because the slaves were freed. Because if you actually study history after slavery ended, they did not keep calling themselves slaves. They referred to themselves as former slaves, ex-slaves, freedmen, black freedmen. This is how you get the Freedmen's Bank or the U.S. Bureau of Freedmen, Refugees, and Abandoned Lands, known as the Freedmen's Bureau. They didn't keep calling themselves slaves. So why do we refer to ourselves as descendants of slaves? Why do some of us, and some people mean well, others don't, why do some of us keep trying to put our ancestors back into a status that not only were they legally freed from, but they also took up arms and fought to free themselves from that status, because there were approximately 200,000 African Americans that fought in the Civil War and fought on behalf of the Union in the Army and the Navy. They took up arms to fight for their freedom. So they didn't keep calling themselves slaves after slavery ended. So why do we do that? Maybe it's because we've been taught to have a slave mentality. In 1865, the Florida State Legislature enacted Black Code way to control freedmen, the Black freedmen. A crucial component of the Black Codes was an expansion of the criminal justice system to deal with minor offenses, that legislators believed African Americans were likely to commit and that had been formally punished by their masters. This is what's taking place during Reconstruction, right? So what's going to happen is in Florida and other southern states, they're going to expand the number of crimes that get classified as felonies so that you can increase the number of African Americans that you disenfranchise from being able to vote because you prosecute them and convict them of felonies. This is felony disenfranchisement. And we're going to see this take place after the Civil War ends, even before 1870, when the 15th Amendment is adopted, but especially after 1870. And in Florida, what they're doing is they're targeting minor offenses that the white legislatures believe that African Americans were more likely to commit, and making those felonies, upgrading them from a misdemeanor to a felony. The black codes had their desired effect by the 1870s and 1880s. Estimates show that more than 95% of the convicts in the Florida convict camps were African American. A captain in one of the camps at the time noted it was possible to send a Negro to prison on almost any pretext, but difficult to get a white man there, end quote. But difficult to get a white man there. Now, this is what they really feared. The white supremacists in Florida, this is what they really feared. They feared a Negro legislature. Why did they fear a Negro legislature? Okay, because 48% of the population of the state of Florida in 1868 was African American. As a legacy of slavery, we were almost 50% of the population in Florida, and they feared us voting and dominating in the state legislature. And African Americans now writing laws and voting on laws that white people then have to live by. The same white people that were enslaving African people, now they feared a Negro legislature, and these Negroes up here passing laws that white men now have to follow. Felony disenfranchisement in the 1868 Florida State Constitution was part of a larger effort to prevent a quote unquote Negro legislature. Post-emancipation, after emancipation, and the former slaves were freed, 1865, legislators in Florida feared that freedmen, not slaves, but freedmen who then constituted 48% of the state's population would take over state and local government, because they knew we were going to vote. Because you don't vote for exercise. As I said on Roland Martin Unfiltered last Friday, and as I said on my radio show, we need to stop telling African Americans to exercise your right to vote. You don't vote for exercise. You vote for power. If you want to exercise, go to the gym and exercise. Voting is about power. Voting is about being able to get your agenda pushed, getting policies put in place that are beneficial to you, your community, your people, etc. Politics is the legal distribution that scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. Okay, laws and policies shape the economy. They impact the tax structure. They impact student loan forgiveness, criminal justice reform. They impact the SBA, Small Business Administration. They determine which drugs are going to be legal. They determine which drugs are going to be illegal. They determine the role the Department of Justice has, and the Department of Justice investigating policies and practices of police departments. All that deals with politics and law. Has nothing to do with exercising. So voting is about power. And we have to wrap our minds around that concept and understand that we have to be able to push our policies, agendas the farthest and get the most accomplished. But to be able to understand which policies need to be put in place and understand that whole process, you have to understand history. You have to understand how you got here, the laws and policies that were put in place to put us in this predicament, so we know where we need to go from here and how to bring that into effect. Okay, so the 1868 Florida State Constitution contains several provisions to prevent this from happening, to prevent a Negro legislature from happening. For example, it established a state legislative apportionment scheme that inflated the representation of predominantly white counties while deflating the representation of predominantly African American counties. It also gave the governor of the state of Florida the power to appoint local officials, thereby preventing local African American majorities from electing their own leaders. This all deals with politics. One legislator wrote that this and other such provisions were designed to, quote unquote, prevent a Negro legislature, prevent a Negro legislature, because they did not fear us exercising. They feared African Americans having political power. And many people still do today. This is why you have these voter suppression bills. This is why you have these election deniers. This is why they fear African Americans having political power. Now, felony disenfranchisement was yet another mechanism intended to suppress the political power of newly freed slaves. Okay, so you have felony disenfranchisement, but also you had physical intimidation and race massacres like the one that took place November 2nd, 1920. So I just want to give you some background historical information on Florida and the methods they used to suppress the African American vote in Florida. Okay. All right. Now, okay, let's continue. Let's go back to the piece here from the Zen Education Project, because I have to teach this class as soon as I finish this broadcast also. How y'all like this type of information? You can register for our Tuesday class that I teach at our online school, from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. We'll get deep into this information. And that we have the information at our website, TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com, TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com. It's also on the thread of this broadcast. The class is on sale $80, regularly $130. So we'll give you some more information on that. And you can watch, we do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch them anytime. Even a year from now, 2 years from now, you'll still have access to the full class. You can go back and watch it. All right, and we're going to post this here. It says register here. Let me post this here. Okay. All right, let's continue. Okay, this is the piece from the Zen Education Project. Let's go back to that. Okay, the response by the, let's see here. Let me back up. Okay. So Moses Norman, after being turned away from the voting polls, would not be so easily deterred. After being turned away from the voting polls that morning in his Ocoee, Florida precinct, he rode to Orlando to seek the counsel of Cheney. All right. Now, Moses Norman returned to Ocoee, Florida, with instructions, along with a handful of African American citizens, again seeking to vote. All right. Now, after being forcibly turned away, Moses Norman demanded the poll workers' names and exclaimed, quote, "We will vote by God," end quote. "We will vote by God." The response by the cowardly Ku Klux Klan was a massacre of African Americans who were trying to vote because they understood the power of voting and they understood the need for political power. Okay, now 1868, African Americans were 48% of the population. 1920, we were probably still pretty much close to that. somewhere between 40 to 40% of the population in the state of Florida. Now, one of the people killed was Julius July Perry. Julius July Perry, who I showed you a picture of a few minutes ago. And he was a very well-respected man in the African-American community. He was a labor leader. He was a deacon in the church. Okay. Now, this information here comes from the documentary Ocoee on Fire, dealing with Julius July Perry. Julius Perry had become the well-respected godfather of the Black community. He served as a deacon in the church and the local labor leader or straw boss. It was said that anyone seeking to employ Black laborers needed to speak with Julius July Perry first. He was an admired, brave, and rational thinker, a sort of civil rights leader before there was a civil rights movement. He encouraged young African Americans to be educated and stand up for themselves as first-class citizens. He encouraged young African Americans to be educated and stand up for themselves as first-class citizens. Okay, now, Julius Perry's wife, Estelle, his 3 sons and daughter, Coretha Perry Caldwell, lived on a large estate that included their home and several barns and outbuildings. They regularly opened their doors to anyone in need. If anyone was in trouble, they knew they could find advice and sanctuary in the Perry home. Okay. All right. They have a link here for some more information. And there's a video here you can watch dealing with the Ocoee Massacre also. So check out this article from the Zen Education Project, November 2nd, 1920, the Ocoee Massacre. All right. There was there's a really good article from the Washington Post dealing with the Ocoee Massacre also that I want to go to. And this one is called "A White Mob Unleashed the Worst Election Day Violence in U.S. History a Century Ago." Mob unleashed the worst election day violence in U.S. history in Florida a century ago. This article is from November 2nd, 2020, which was the 100th commemoration of the Ocoee Massacre of November 2nd, 1920. Okay, let me blow this up here. All right. Okay, so if we look at what happened based upon what we know, there's some differing accounts, but if we look at what we know was certain. November 2nd, 1920, the same day women voted nationally for the first time. This is a presidential election. Women voted nationally for the first time because of the 19th Amendment. The worst instance of election day violence in American history unfolded in a small town west of Orlando, Florida. And the perpetrators got away with what they did for the rest of their lives. There are no roadside markers in Ocoee. Now, there is one marker put up in like 2021 that talks about July Perry and what happened to him in the Ocoee Massacre. There's a historical marker that was put up there. 1920 looks like. Looks like it was put up, well, according to blackpast.org, June 21st, 2019, a historical marker honoring July Perry and others killed in the massacre was placed in Heritage Square outside the Orange County Regional History Center. Until recently, many descendants of survivors had no idea they were descendants of survivors of the Ocoee, Florida massacre, or that they had been robbed of a valuable inheritance long before they were born. Let me see here. Okay. Now, Ocoee, Florida was founded in the 1850s by a white man who brought 23 enslaved African Americans with him. Okay. After the Civil War, many Confederate veterans resettled there in Ocoee, Florida, hiring Black laborers to work their land. Starting in 1888, many of the laborers were able to purchase the very acres of land over which they had been toiling from their white employers, bringing them wealth and security often denied to African American folks in the Jim Crow South. Now, Florida is still the South and it's still Jim Crow South, but there was still some opportunities that we were, some of us were able to take advantage of in Jim Crow Florida. Florida was also the first state to have poll taxes that was in 1889. Okay, that's in Florida also. And a poll tax was a tax that you had to pay to register to vote. So they usually just applied the poll taxes to African Americans as a way to as a way to put another obstacle in the way of us voting. Now, though it is not accurate to say Ocoee was integrated, there was not a Blacks only neighborhood across the proverbial railroad tracks, as you might find elsewhere in the South, okay, or like you found in Tulsa, Oklahoma, because the railroad tracks in Tulsa, that's what separated North Tulsa, where African Americans lived, from South Tulsa, where white people lived. It was interspersed. It wasn't like here's a Black part of town and here's a white part of town. These people were neighbors for 30 years before the massacre happened. Now, after World War I ended in 1918, as we talked about previously here, African American veterans returned home. We saw the same trends happening nationally take hold in Ocoee, Florida. African American veterans returned home expecting better treatment as they had received in Europe, but white supremacist groups such as the Ku Klux Klan resurfaced to keep that from happening. Racist violence erupted all over the country in what became known as the Red Summer of 1919, as I showed you the article from history.com, the Red Summer of 1919. Now, the term Red Summer comes from James Weldon Johnson. James Weldon Johnson is the same man that wrote the lyrics to Lift Every Voice and Sing Till Earth and Heaven Reigns with the harmony of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Okay, so Lift Every Voice. That's James Weldon Johnson. He wrote the lyrics in about 1900. And it's his brother Rosamond Johnson wrote the melody. And this becomes years later known as the Black National Anthem. Well, it was James Weldon Johnson that coined the term the Red Summer, because the streets of America were flowing with blood. Okay, now the fight for women's suffrage further fueled these tensions in 1920. Okay, and leading up to 1920, the fight for women's suffrage, the fight for the right to vote for women, that fuels a lot of these tensions. And the 1920 presidential election was the first election where women were guaranteed the right to vote based upon the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Many anti-suffragists, or people who were against women having the right to vote, argued that if women, specifically white women, were permitted to vote, Black men might try to vote too. So you had a lot of white men who did not want white women to vote, or African American women to vote, because they feared that African American men would want to vote also. Some suffragists, or those fighting for the right of women to vote, denied this would happen, and some even argued that white women should be allowed to vote so they could act as a bulwark against African American men who might try to exercise their rights to vote also. So they're saying, well, look, white women can be the vote from white women can be a counter to counter the number of black men who vote. So you should let white women vote. In Ocoee, Florida, black and white Republican leaders held clinics to show African American residents how to register to vote and how to pay a poll tax and cast a ballot. Now, the 24th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution banned poll taxes in 1962. A month before the election, two white leaders, Attorney W.R. O'Neill and Judge John Chaney, who we talked about a few minutes ago, both received a threatening letter from the Ku Klux Klan. The letter read, quote, "We shall always enjoy white supremacy in this country, and he who interferes must face the consequences. We shall always enjoy white supremacy in this country, and he who interferes must face the consequences." Now, this is what the Klan is saying. Okay, so across Florida, in Daytona, Florida, Jackson, Florida, and Orlando, local chapters of the Ku Klux Klan held huge rallies to intimidate potential African American voters. Now, Florida may not spring to mind immediately when one thinks of the Jim Crow South, but in fact, there were more lynchings per capita in the Jim Crow in Florida than in any other states besides Mississippi, because we know Mississippi was the state that had the most number of lynchings from 1882 to 1968. They had 581 lynchings in Florida, in Mississippi. 581 lynchings in Mississippi. And this is according to research by the Equal Justice Initiative. Now, white Floridians used racial terrorism. White Floridians used racial terrorism not just to intimidate voters, but also to discourage labor organizing in the orange groves and turpentine farms there in Florida. So they have the letter here, the threatening letter also. Okay, so you can check that out. Now, despite the threats, a handful of black residents in Ocoee, Florida, both men and women, showed up to the voter polls on election day. In the morning, they cast their ballots without incident, according to two accounts. But in the late afternoon, a black labor broker named Moses Norman showed up to vote. Election officials told Moses Norman that he had not paid his poll tax. He said he had paid his poll tax, but he was turned away anyway from the voter polls. Now, Moses Norman sought help from Judge John Chaney, the white judge who advised him to try again. And again, Moses Norman was turned away from the voter polls. It is unclear exactly how or why, but that was the spark that lighted a racist inferno that burned black Ocoee, Florida to the ground. By that evening, a white mob had arrived from Orlando, Florida. A rumor spread that Moses Norman was hiding out in the home of Julius July Perry, an African-American landowner and community leader in his early 50s who had been involved in the voter registration drive. July Perry's house was surrounded by the white mob. At some point, two white men shot and killed. At some point, two white men were shot and killed. Okay, perhaps by Perry's teenage daughter, perhaps by one another, as they fired weapons at the house. Then Julius July Perry's house went up in flames. So did the nearby African Methodist Episcopal Church, the AME Church, where Moses Norman and July Perry were trustees, and at least 24 other homes owned by African Americans were also set on fire. There's a picture of July Perry as well. So basically, the options were leave and get shot or stay and burn. Leave and get shot or stay and burn. And that was said by, let's see, this is Pamela Schwartz, chief curator of the Orange County Regional History Center in Orlando, Florida. Pamela Schwartz, chief curator of the Orange County Regional History Center in Orlando, Florida. Now, it may be never known exactly how many African American residents were killed that night. Newspaper accounts said 6. Witnesses remembered many more, perhaps 30 or even 60. One person claimed 2.5 wagon loads of black bodies were dumped in a trench near the lake. Research is ongoing, but Pamela Schwartz and her team have been able to confirm 4 African Americans were killed. 3 were unidentified burned bodies buried by a funeral home, which probably recorded the deaths only to seek compensation for the caskets. The other was July Perry. Now, the article from the Zen Education Project puts it at least 50 African Americans were murdered. Amazingly, the Perrys made it out of the house alive. Now, July Perry's wife and daughter were taken to a jail in Tampa, Florida. Were taken to the jail in Tampa, Florida. July Perry was shot in the leg, and he was taken to a jail in Orlando, Florida. Now, within hours, a lynch mob pulled Julius July Perry from his cell, and he was brutalized and killed. He was lynched. He was executed. He was killed. His body was left hanging in front of Judge John Chaney's Orlando home. This was the judge that was trying to help him to be able to vote, and other African Americans to be able to vote, because they were voting for power. They understood the power of voting. They weren't voting because they want to exercise. No one was ever held responsible for any of the deadly violence. No one was ever held responsible for any of the deadly violence. Agents of the Bureau of Investigation, which is the precursor to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the precursor to the FBI, was the Bureau of Investigation. They showed up a few weeks later, but they made it clear that they were not investigating murder, arson, or assault. They were investigating election fraud. They were only investigating election fraud. Now, the leader of the mob of the Ocoee Massacre, the leader later became the mayor of Ocoee, Florida. Then in this article, it talks about how July Perry's land was stolen. The land that he owned was stolen. There's a section here on page 5 of this article. They talk about the Rosewood Massacre as well, 1923. I've done a presentation on the Rosewood Massacre. July Perry's family was cheated out of his land also. While his wife was still in jail in Tampa, Florida, his wife signed over the executorship of July Perry's land to Bluford Sims, a Confederate captain and July Perry's former employee. That sounds like a Confederate name too, Bluford. Bluford Sims posted an ad in the newspaper for, quote, beautiful little groves belonging to the Negroes that have just left Ocoee. This is an ad he placed in the newspaper. Okay, he's trying to sell the land that July Perry owned. Quote, beautiful little groves belonging to the Negroes that have just left Ocoee. Now, after years of litigation, July Perry's children received about $100 each for land that he owned that sold for thousands of dollars. Now, some more background information on Ocoee, Florida. Ocoee, Florida was a whites-only sundown town until the 1970s. Now, sundown town means that a lot of these towns at like 5 o'clock or something like that, African Americans could work in the town, but a bell would ring or a whistle would blow at like 5 o'clock or something like that. And that was a signal for the African Americans to get out of the town before sundown hit. Otherwise, you could be harassed, you could be beat up, you could be killed, you could be put in jail. These were sundown towns. Florida had a lot of sundown towns. Ocoee was one of them. Now, African Americans in the region never forgot what happened there in Ocoee, Florida. In the late 1990s, a local activist group, the Democracy Forum, pressed for town halls about the Ocoee massacre, some of which included descendants of the perpetrators. Sometimes the sentiment was, it's better to let sleeping dogs lie, Pamela Schwartz said. 15 years later and 35 miles away, an African-American teenager named Trayvon Martin was shot to death in Sanford, Florida. Sanford, Florida was the same city that Jackie Robinson was ran out of. And we know Trayvon Martin's, sparked a nationwide protest, and the Black Lives Matter movement came out of the protests surrounding the killing of Trayvon Martin. In 2017, members of the Democracy Forum approached the History Center with its archive of the Ocoee Massacre. They also asked for a 100th anniversary commemoration in 2020. Now, in 2018, the city of Ocoee, Florida, released a proclamation acknowledging the massacre. A formal apology to the descendants is in the works, and the Florida legislature has passed a law requiring that the Ocoee Election Day massacre be taught in Florida schools. Okay. Now, they should also teach about August 27th, 1960 in Jacksonville, Florida. You all familiar with that? Axe Handle Saturday? Axe Handle Saturday saw about 200 Ku Klux Klan members. They beat civil rights activists who were sitting in at the lunch counters in Jacksonville, Florida. They beat them with axe handles. Okay, that's August 27th, 1960 in Jacksonville, Florida. And that's called Axe Handle Saturday. This article here from the Washington, Axe Handle Saturday. Axe Handle Saturday, the Klan's vicious attack on black protesters in Florida 60 years ago. This is an article, August 27, 2020, by Sidney Trent. This is one of the civil rights workers who was beaten. Okay. This caption says a Jacksonville, Florida police officer stands with Charles Griffin after he was attacked. Stands with Charles Griffin after he was attacked on August 27th, 1960, during the lunch counter protest by civil rights activists in Florida. This picture is courtesy of the Florida Historical Society. Okay, so read about Axe Handle Saturday. This also happened in Florida. Let me go back to this other piece here. How y'all like this type of information? Give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like. We'll go back to this in just a second. If you like this type of information, you can register for the online history classes that I teach on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. As soon as I finish this broadcast, we're going to do our Tuesday, November 1st class. But I'm preparing. I have to do a presentation for the Midwest Decarbonization Environmental Summit on Wednesday. I'm speaking there Wednesday and Friday. It's a virtual summit. We have the information on our fan page. You can register for that, and we'll put it on our website also. So I'm running behind schedule today, but you can register for the online classes that I teach. We have the link here in the thread of the broadcast. It's also on the homepage of our website, TheAHNShow.com, TheAHNShow.com. So when you scroll down the page, you'll see the information for the radio show. You'll see our Cash App and PayPal information. On Wednesdays, I teach ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. So we teach that class on Wednesday, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That class is on sale $80, regularly $130. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it anytime. So even a year from now, 2 years from now, you can watch the entire class. Then on Tuesdays, I teach from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. Okay, it's the same cost and the same structure of the class. And we have a bundle pack where you can register for both classes, on sale $130. That's a over $300 value. And you click right here to register here. You can use debit card, credit card. If you've taken any of my online classes in the past, email me at AHNshow@theAfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AHNshow@theAfricanHistoryNetwork.com, or just click right here on Contact the African History Network. Okay, and you can email us right through the website. Okay, you can email us right through the website. All right. Let's continue here. Okay, I want to go back to quickly this article here from the Washington Post. And then there's a quick article that I want to show you from blackpast.org has some information on this also. Blackpast. And then there was a scholarship set up, okay, for the descendants. So I want to talk briefly about that because I talked about this on the African History Network show when this article came out June 4th, 2021, dealing with the scholarship that was set up for the descendants. Let me go back to this one here. Okay, the article from the Washington Post, a white mob unleashed the worst election day violence in U.S. history. A white mob unleashed the worst election day violence in U.S. history in Florida a century ago. If we go back to that article, the last page 6 of the article, It says the property where the AME church used to be, that was burned down, is now a Mexican restaurant. The main road is named for Bluford Simmons, although there's a petition to change it. Now, Bluford Simmons was the former Confederate who July Perry's wife signed over July Perry's land to. She signed it over to Bluford Simmons, Bluford Sims, the white man who took out the ad in the newspaper to sell the land. A newer house stands where July Perry's home used to be. When reached by a Washington Post reporter, the homeowner said he, quote, didn't know anything about that before ending the call. That's interesting. I would want to know more. Really? There was a massacre here? And African Americans were ran out, and at least 50 were killed, and 500 had to flee? I want to know more about that. Now, maybe if my ancestors were involved in running them out, maybe I wouldn't want to know about that. This past summer 2020, when this article came out, this past summer, as the History Center put the final touches on its exhibit, the nation erupted in protest after the killing of another African-American man, George Floyd, May 25th, 2020. One evening, one of the staff members went to a Black Lives Matter protest in Orlando, Florida, where she was surprised to see a young man holding up a sign that read, July Perry, Ocoee, Florida, November 2nd, 1920. Jennifer Jenkins and Samantha Schmidt also contributed to this report. Read this article here from Washington Post. A white mob unleashed the worst election day violence in U.S. history in Florida a century ago, by Jillian Burkell, November 2nd, 2020. They were not afraid of us exercising. They were afraid of us having political power. And many people still are afraid of African Americans having political power today. Now what's interesting, the piece from blackpast.org on this, and it's just one part I want to highlight. You can read the rest of it. And we deal with a lot of information like this in the online classes that I teach. Let's look at this right here. Okay, the Ocoee Massacre, 1920. Here's a picture of July Perry. But I want to look at something here. Now, Walter White of the NAACP investigated the massacre, and he passed for white. Okay, he passed as a Caucasian during the visit. He could pass for white. That's how light-skinned he was. He reported that some locals were, quote unquote, still giddy with victory. Some locals were still giddy with victory when he arrived. He also said that locals reported 56 African Americans killed, but he claimed 30 deaths in his official report. In 1921, the NAACP and other civil rights organizations called on the House Election Committee of the U.S. Congress to investigate the massacre and Black voter suppression in Florida, but the U.S. House of Representatives failed to act. This is what the NAACP was doing in 1921. Okay, here's the historical marker. It says lynching of July Perry, November 3rd, 1920. Okay, here's the historical marker. On June 21st, 2019, a historical marker honoring July Perry and others killed in the massacre was placed in Heritage Square outside the Orange County Regional History Center. Okay, now there's a part here. This part right here. The mob then turned on the Black community of Ocoee, Florida. They burned down homes and businesses and demanded that the Black residents leave Ocoee, Florida, In the face of this threatened violence, the entire African-American population fled the town. Some African-Americans speculated that the rioting may have been planned so that some whites could seize the property of the wealthiest Blacks in the town. Now, to be honest, I don't know if that's why, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was. I don't have evidence to prove that's what happened, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was true. Some African Americans speculated that the rioting may have been planned so that some whites could seize the property of the wealthiest Blacks in town, especially if those African Americans like actually live there in Ocoee, Florida, or if they have like firsthand accounts of some who were survivors, and this is what they're saying. I'll take that word for that, because they know better than they were there, right? And they know the white people they were dealing with. They were there. So if that's what they thought, I would go with that. Okay, so you can read this full article here. The Ocoee Massacre, 1920. All right, now there was a let me see, Vice.com has an article on this that I read. This piece from Vice. That time, white people burned and pillaged a Black community on Election Day. Okay, all right, we're back. Okay, stand by. Okay, we're back. You should be able to hear me. All right, testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3. Okay, we're back. All right. Okay, let's continue. There was an article from Vice.com on the Ocoee, Florida massacre. It's just one part that I want to highlight here. Where is that one? This one right here. The name of the article from Vice.com is White People Burned. Let me see. That time, white people burned and pillaged a Black community on Election Day. Let's pull this one up. This is from Vice. That time, white people burned and pillaged a Black community on Election Day. The 1920 massacre in Ocoee, Florida involved white lynchings, castrating, and removing hundreds of Blacks from their land in retaliation for them trying to exercise their right to vote. But they didn't fear us exercising. They feared us having political power. And this is why now we were voting, right? In spite of the felony disenfranchisement law written into the Florida State Constitution in 1868 to prevent a Negro legislature. Okay, we were voting despite all of that. All right, now there's a, let me see, which article is this here? Okay, there's a part I want to go to. Oh, and this article is written by Deborah Douglas. It's important to understand this chronology of history because this happens 2 years after World War II ends, and this happens 1920, the year after the Red Summer of 1919. Election Day 1920 gave us one of the most violent, horrific stories in the democracy, and unfortunately, despite its loss and the unimaginable racism that precipitated the carnage, it's a tale that has largely been left untold. So we saw the presidential election between Warren G. Harding and James M. Cox. Warren G. Harding won the presidential election. The events began when a white lynch mob hanging one black man, and it culminated with an even larger mob terrorizing and torching the homes of an entire community of African Americans. In the end, some historians estimate that as many as 500 African Americans were forced from their homes. These people ran for their lives after being given the ultimatum, die or flee. Today, this bloody snapshot of American history is referred to as the Ocoee Massacre. I want to go to this part right here and go down a little bit. And yet the opposition to black voting was immense leading up to the November 2nd, 1920 election. It helped fuel the resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan throughout the South because the Klan gains a lot of power in the 1920s. They are increasing their numbers and gain a lot of power and political power in the 1920s. Because the Klan had by 1915, the Klan had largely died out. They were not, throughout history, just a dominant organization. No, they were founded December 24th, 1865 in Pulaski, Tennessee. Later in the same month that the 13th Amendment is adopted. It's ratified December 6, 1865, when Georgia ratifies the 13th Amendment. It's adopted December 18th. Then about a week later, the Klan is founded. Okay. So by 1915, a lot of the early members of the Klan have died out. The KKK responded to voter registration drives for African Americans in Florida by holding its own hostile demonstrations in cities like Miami and Orlando, threatening the kind of violence and terror that it ultimately perpetuated in Ocoee, Florida, with impunity. Okay, I want to skip to page. Page 2. Okay, this is this picture here is in Rosewood, Florida, 1923. A black home set on fire by a violent white mob in Rosewood, Florida. That was January 1923. The Rosewood, Florida massacre. The movie Rosewood, from director John Singleton, starring Ving Rhames and John Voight. That's about the Rosewood massacre. I want to go, let me see. Drunk off the violence and lusting for more blood, the white mob turned its wrath on 2 black areas of Ocoee, Florida. The mob set fire to rows of Black-owned homes, Black churches, and Black schoolhouses. The African Americans in the community tried to fight back using firearms in shootouts, but the white mob prevailed and went about torturing anyone who remained. One African American man named James Langmead, Langmead, refused to leave. For his valiance, according to Fusel's account, he was castrated. Quote, one woman, heavily pregnant, had stayed in her home because she did not think she could run fast enough to escape the deputized whites, writes Fusel. And Fusel is, hold on, let me see. So I have a bunch of articles on this. That was Melissa Fusel. In the William and Mary Law Review. She has a piece, she has an article in the William and Mary Law Review. That's Melissa Fusel. Her, quote, her mother unknown perished with her in the flames. One man hiding in the barn tried to escape when the mob set fire to the barn, but ran back inside to his death after the mob shot at him, unquote. Now, as many as 50 African Americans were removed from their land. As many as 50 African Americans were removed from their land after the violent riot or massacre. The Ku Klux Klan set an embargo around the town of Ocoee, Florida, to ensure that none of them could come back to their homes. In the meantime, the whites seized the property, sometimes with deeds requiring that the land, quote, never be conveyed to Negroes again. That's called a restrictive covenant. A restrictive covenant. A restrictive covenant is a way that was used to keep African Americans from buying property, especially in white areas, and lock us out of wealth building through buying homes, through buying real estate. It was written into the deeds that you cannot sell this property to a Negro. Okay, that's called a restrictive covenant. So what some of these white people did was they ran us off our land, killed us, took our property, and then wrote into the deeds that the land, quote, never be conveyed to Negroes, end quote, again. They didn't fear us exercising. They feared us having political power. This is why you have to understand history and law, because history and law and politics, all that intersects. Politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. Okay, all this is connected. Now, there was last article. How's everybody doing? Give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like on this broadcast. Be sure to register for our online class, because I'm going to teach one. As soon as I finish, we're going to do our Tuesday class. I'm running late, but we're going to do an hour of our Tuesday class from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. And then on Wednesdays, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Wednesdays, I teach Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Okay, there was a article from June 4th, 2021 from MiamiNewTimes.com, and I talked about this on the African History Network show when this story came out. So that was June 2021. look at this. Florida approved scholarship fund as reparations for 1920 massacre. Let me pull this article up just a second. I'm going to post the information here. You can register for this, help support the African History Network, helps us keep doing the research, stay in the air, keep broadcasting. Okay. Also, you can support us through Cash App and PayPal, $ TheAHNShow through Cash App, through PayPal, paypal.me/TheAHNShow. This helps us keep doing the research. Also, November 8th, Tuesday, November 8th, I will be in Washington, D.C. and on the 6-hour broadcast, actually, it's going to be 7 hours. The 7-hour election. What the hell is this doing? So I can hear it. Let me refresh the screen. Okay, we're back. Okay, so I'm going to go to this last article here in just a minute. Tuesday, November 8th, I will be in Washington, D.C. I will be one of the panelists, one of the political commentators, political analysts on Roland Martin Unfiltered, a special 6-hour broadcast, Election Day broadcast for Roland Martin Unfiltered. You know, I'm a panelist every Friday on Roland Martin Unfiltered. So I leave out Tuesday morning, flying to DC. Okay, and if you want to support us, you can also support us $ TheAHNShow through Cash App or through PayPal, paypal.me/TheAHN. After I'm paying my way there, but I'll be in studio. Be my first time being in their studio. Their broadcast, their election day broadcast, dealing with the returns, is 6 p.m. to 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. 6 p.m. to 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can watch that on download the Black Star Media app to your phone, or watch on Facebook or YouTube at Roland S. Martin. I'll share the broadcast on our fan page also. Okay. So this piece here is Florida approved scholarship fund as reparations for Massacre. This is from MiamiNewTimes.com, MiamiNewTimes.com. And I'm also going to post the information here, the link where you can register for the online classes also. This is on our website, TheAfricanHistoryNetwork.com. So very briefly here, this is one good thing that no good Ron DeSantis did do. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. You still don't want to use that clock to tell time by. This week, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed a state budget bill that includes a scholarship program for the descendants of the victims of one of Florida's bloodiest incidents of racial violence. The scholarship is a rare instance of reparations for wrongs committed against African Americans in the U.S. The Randolph Bracy Ocoee Scholarship Program. It's called the Randolph Bracy Ocoee Scholarship Program, named for the item's sponsor, Senator Randolph Bracy. This scholarship will award 50 college scholarships of up to $6,100 per student for students whose ancestors were victims of the 1920 Ocoee Massacre, an election day bloodbath that targeted African Americans in the central Florida city of Ocoee. Now, the bill that no good Governor Ron DeSantis signed, and Florida needs to be desanitized of Ron DeSantis. The bill makes no explicit mention of the term reparations and intentional omission on the part of its sponsor, okay, Senator Randolph Bracey, to help the bill pass through the Florida state legislature. And this is something that I've talked about on my show before. It makes sense to take the name, the title, or the word reparations off of what we want, because when you start talking about reparations, that automatically brings about a whole lot of backlash. Okay. And because if you understand the federal legislature, the majority of the people in the House and the Senate that have to vote on these bills are white. And the majority of their constituents, generally speaking, the majority of their constituents overall are white also. So whatever policies we want, it'll make more sense to take the term reparations of it and just push the policies, as opposed to having the name reparations on it, because that becomes a focus of white backlash. Reparations. And then you have people say, oh, my ancestors didn't own slaves, things like that. Well, first of all, nobody asked you if your ancestors owned slaves or not. Then you got to get through all that. Just deal with the laws and policies put in place that have now distributed wealth, power, and resources, and deal with the policies that need to be put in place and how it's good for America in general, and take the name reparations off of it. When you study the history of slavery in this country, there was a reason why most African slaves who ran away at nighttime and not in the daytime. Because if they ran away at daytime, it'd be much easier to see what they were doing, and it'd be much easier to catch them. If you look at Tommy Tuberville, Senator Tommy Tuberville of the state of Alabama, and if we look at the article, so he made some ridiculous statements a couple weeks ago, and he said something to the effect of, and I have the article here because this quote from the Washington Post deals with it deals with how the GOP, how Republicans are using a lot of coded language, and these are all, I do a lot of research. These are all like recent articles. Okay, this act here deals with midterm elections. Like this stuff right here. While Republicans are focusing so much on crime and inflation, this is from the October 17th, 2022. See, this stack here deals with midterm elections. Hold on, there was this piece. Was it in this stack? There was one, I just saw it. Hold on, let me find this, because this deals with the coded language that they're using. And he says something to the effect that the Democrats want reparations for the people who are out in the streets committing the crimes. Where's that article? That's not. I think it's in this one here. Is it in this one? I just saw it. Racist GOP appeals heat up in final weeks. Yeah, this here, because I was dealing with Louisiana. Louisiana wants to change who gets counted as black to lock more African Americans out of voting. This deals with the redrawing of the congressional districts. Okay, so this article right here. Let me pull this up from Washington Post. And this is from October 15th, 2022. Racist GOP appeals heat up in final weeks before midterms. Let's pull this up. All right, Robert Harris. Okay, thanks for the support through Cash App. Really appreciate that. Definitely need that. Racist GOP appeals heat up in final weeks before midterms. The toxic remarks appear to be receiving less pushback from Republicans than in past years, because it's the white nationalist party, and they've been co-opted by Donald Trump and the election deniers and the coup plotters and the QAnon conspiracy theorists. This is from October 15th, 2022 by Liz Goodwin. Now, this is dumbass Senator Tommy Tuberville. Used to be a college football coach. He didn't serve in the Senate before. He didn't serve in politics before. He was a football coach. And then in Georgia, they go get a former Heisman Trophy winner, never served an elected official. He's an honorary sheriff running around with his sheriff's badge, talking about he has power, he can help the police and stuff like that. He does not have arresting power. He has an honorary badge. Herschel Walker. Another woman's come out and said that he forced her to get an abortion. She did an interview and showing her face. She's a white woman. Surprise, surprise, surprise. Okay, where is this one? Hold on, where'd it go? Just a second. Okay. So, yeah, Senator Tommy Tuberville, Republican of Alabama, addresses a campaign rally in Minden Tahoe Airport, at the Minden Tahoe Airport on October 8th, 2022 in Minden, Nevada. Senator Tommy Tuberville suggested at a rally in Nevada in October that African Americans are criminals. A day later in Arizona, dumbass Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican of Georgia, appeared to refer to a specious conspiracy theory about immigrants that has been associated with white nationalists, baseless claim that at least 2 GOP candidates for the U.S. Senate have echoed. In Wisconsin and North Carolina, Democratic candidates for Senate have faced a barrage of ads on crime that feature mugshots of Black defendants. These are ads Republicans are running. Now, as the campaign heats up in the final weeks before November's midterm elections, November 8th, midterm elections, so have overt appeals to racial animus and resentment. And the toxic remarks appear to be receiving less pushback from Republicans than in past years. See, because like Republicans like John McCain, who would have pushed back, John McCain of Arizona, who I disagree with pretty much every bill that he voted for, largely speaking. John McCain would have pushed back on something like that. He's dead. He's not in the Senate anymore. He's dead. John McCain would have pushed back on something like this. And the toxic remarks appear to be receiving less pushback from spineless Republicans, like punk-ass Lindsey Graham out of South Carolina, than in past years, suggesting that some candidates in the first post-Trump election cycle have been influenced by the former trader-in-chief's norm-breaking example. Now, Michael Steele, African-American Michael Steele, who's the former Republican National Committee chair, and they kicked him out. Okay. Rush Limbaugh didn't like Michael Steele, and they kicked Michael Steele out. He said, quote, anybody who's got a title in the party could say something. Senator, governor, anybody. He noted a deafening silence in the party after Senator Tommy Tuberville's comment. Quote, anyone could stand up and say, can we stop this, please? But they won't. At the Nevada rally that was staged by Donald Trump in the town of Minden, okay, on Saturday, October, that would have been October 15th, Saturday, October 15th. For the state's top Republican candidates, Senator Tommy Tuberville called Democrats, quote unquote, pro-crime, even though the red states, some of the red states have more crime than some of the blue states. I'm going to pull up some information on that here just a second. Okay, I'll pull up some information on that here in just a second. Then I have to teach this class too. I'm going to do an hour of the class today. Quote, they want crime, he continued. They want crime because they want to take over what you got. They want crime because they want to take over what you got. They want to control what you have. They want reparations because they think the people that do the crime are owed that. Now, this is what Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama, Republican, said on the campaign trail. October 15th, he said it's in Nevada, October 15th, 2022. He said the Democrats want crime. They want crime because they want to take over what you got. They want to control what you have. They want reparations because they think the people that do the crime are owed that. Just so people understand, no Republicans in the House or the Senate support reparations, not even the black ones. Not Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, not Burgess Owens of Utah, not Byron Donalds. Is it Byron Donalds or Brian? No, one of the dumbass out of Florida. Brian Donalds, that idiot. Is it hold on, which one? Yeah. No, hold on. It is, I want the black guy married to the white woman. Hold on just a second. Let me find the right one. Yeah. This dumbass right here. Go research this guy. Roland interviewed him on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Most of the policies that are beneficial to African Americans, this idiot voted against them. Then I went to the Twitter page, saw he's married a white woman, and because when I saw him on Roland Martin Unfiltered, I'm listening to him. He voted against the American Rescue Plan. He voted against the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. He voted against the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And I went to his Twitter page, married to a white woman. Oh, that makes sense. See, I can tell. I see why he's smiling. Protecting Florida's most important national resource, white supremacy. That's what he's protecting. Meet Byron. He has spent his entire adult life serving others, whether it's through violent others. Okay. Now the question Byron needs to ask himself Byron Donalds, the question you and Burgess Owens and all these Negroes out here that are supporting these, the part of this white nationalist party and support these white supremacists, the question you need to ask yourself is what happens to you when you have outlived your usefulness to white supremacy? That's the question you really need to ask yourself. Ask Michael Steele, who is the African-American chair of the Republican Party. They pushed him out of the Republican, they pushed him out of the chairmanship. They pushed him out of this chairmanship. And Rush Limbaugh was a big adversary of Michael Steele. Ask Omarosa when they threw Omarosa out the White House. Ask Herman Cain. Ask Herman Cain. Herman Cain died of COVID. And Herman Cain was in the hospital. Donald Trump did not authorize Herman Cain to have the experimental COVID drug that Donald Trump took that saved his life. Herman Cain was a big Donald Trump ass kisser. He died of COVID. Okay. The question you need to ask yourself, and all of them, what happens when you have outlived your usefulness to white supremacy? So this is what Tommy Tuberville said, attacking reparations and associating African Americans with crime. Now, a debate over whether to provide reparations or compensation to the descendants of people formerly enslaved in the United States, has existed in the country for decades. By invoking it, Senator Tommy Tuberville appeared to link African Americans to crime in a battleground state where Republicans are fighting to gain one Senate seat, and with it potentially the majority in the Senate, so they can stop President Biden's federal nominations to the federal bench. Okay, he's gotten like about 84 of his nominations to the federal bench. Federal judges confirm. They can stop his nomination. They can block his nominations to the U.S. Supreme Court. You won't be able to get bills passed in the Senate. Or it's going to be very hard because the Senate majority leader controls which bills come to the Senate floor for debate or for a vote. And if Mitch McConnell is Senate majority leader, he's going to shut down all this stuff. Like he did when Republicans took control of the Senate in 2014. And for all the people who think, oh, Republicans are going to do a better job. Yeah, that's right. See, Herman Cain was at the, I talked about this when it happened. Herman Cain, there was a big Trump rally. It's a super spreader Trump rally. Herman Cain was there with a bunch of black Trump supporters, and they weren't wearing masks. Most of the people at that Trump rally, it was an indoor Trump rally, most of them weren't wearing masks. We don't know for certain that he got COVID from that super spreader event, but it's most likely that he did. We don't know what percent certainty got COVID from there, but it was shortly after that event that he came down with COVID. And he took a picture, and he had the picture on his Twitter page. I think it was Twitter, maybe also Facebook, but he had it on his Twitter page, taking pictures with the other African Americans there with their Trump hats on, all this stuff, not wearing masks. And he had information on his Twitter page mocking wearing masks. And he caught COVID and died from COVID. What happens when you have outlived your usefulness to white supremacy? And then when they had the Republican National Convention, it happened after he died. They didn't even mention his name. This was during the 2020 presidential election. They had the Republican National Convention. They televised it. Okay. It was on mainstream TV. They televised it. They didn't even mention his name. You know, like at the Grammys, they have like a section at a segment of the Grammys, like the entertainers and the music stars that they lost this year. Okay, and they play the music, and on the big screen they show their name and things like that, and their birth date and the date they died, and they have the scroll and they show the different one. They didn't do that for Herman. The remark by Senator Tommy Tuberville drew condemnations from civil rights leaders and Democrats, but most Republicans stayed silent or offered over only mild responses. Representative Don Bacon, Republican from Nebraska, said, "I'm not going to say he's being racist." He said this on NBC's Meet the Press when asked about the comment. He said, quote, "But I would not use that language. Be more polite." A spokesman for Senator Tommy Tuberville used to be a football coach. And just because he's a football coach doesn't mean he should be a U.S. senator. Just because he's a great football coach, does that mean he should fly a plane? It's like the analogy that President Obama just made about Herschel Walker is a good analogy. If you're going through an airport and you saw Herschel Walker, say, "Hey, that's Heisman Trophy winner Herschel Walker. Let's get him to fly the plane." Because I would ask, okay, does Herschel Walker have a pilot's license? Has he ever flown a plane before? I mean, sure, Herschel Walker may say, "Hey, I've never crashed a plane before." Well, you've never flown a plane before either, you dumbass. The racial invective, back to the Washington Post article, the racial invective has come at a time when Democrats are dealing with their own scandal in Los Angeles, where Democratic city council members and a labor leader were recorded making racist statements. Two of them resigned this week after Democrats, including President Biden, called on them to do so. Karine Jean-Pierre, White House press secretary, said, "Here's the difference between Democrats and MAGA Republicans. When a Democrat says something racist or anti-Semitic, we hold Democrats accountable. When a MAGA Republican says something racist or anti-Semitic, they are embraced by cheering crowds." Okay, read the rest of this here. Read the rest of this article. This is from October 15th, 2022, Washington Post. Racist GOPs heat up in weeks before midterms. Heat up in weeks before midterms. Let me put this article back in the stack it came from. Just a second. All right, now, let's get this stack back right here. We got that. That's Vice. Oh, the last article. I wanted to look at this here dealing with crime. Hold on. Let's put this stack together. This is Ocoee Massacre. See, these are just, I have two stacks. So I have two big stacks of articles. This is half of like one of the stacks of articles that's to my right. These are like all recent articles. Like this is some stuff. This is from my file on reparations, because I'm on a reparations panel tomorrow. California calls for comprehensive reparations. So I have a file folder on reparations. This is like just part of the file folder, but this is the stack here. All this stuff. This is like all recent research. This is, I was pulling some information on criminal justice, like Biden signs executive order on policing 2 years after George Floyd's death, all this stuff. Okay, this is from CBS News, right? So, because I have a file on the Biden-Harris administration. So this is like half of the stack. Okay, and then I got two stacks on the desk next to me. And then I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 stacks of articles on the floor that are about 2 feet high, 1.5 feet, 2 feet high. So this piece right here, let me see. We've got, okay, I Googled it. Well, this is Yahoo. Red states and more crime. Let me pull this up. Hold on. So Republicans focusing on crime, that is a that is a Southern strategy. Okay, so let's look at this article here quickly from Yahoo News. This is from Chambersburg Public Opinion. Let me see some of the Fox News. Where's the meat of the article? Okay, this article here. And I've seen some analysis on this topic, how crime is worse in Republican states than Democratic states. Do Republican or Democratic states have more crime? Do Republican or Democratic states have more crime? This is from June 15, 2022 by Bill Genlisberger. What is it? Genlisberger. So he says the Fox Network, Newsmax, and other right-wing propaganda machines have blamed Democrats for rising crime rates so often and for so long that many of us believe the narrative and have made it part of our knowledge base, except it is wrong. On the other hand, it is accurate that the murder rate in the U.S. has gone up at an alarming rate. On the other hand, despite the right-wing media narrative to the contrary, this is a problem that afflicts Republican-run cities and states more than Democratic states, okay? It is a problem that afflicts Republican-run cities and Republican-run states more than Democratic states. Now, that's contrary to the campaign ads that Republicans are running right now, using a Southern strategy and scaring white people of crime, scaring white people about crime, and really trying to scare them about African Americans and Latinos regarding crime. That's really what this is about. So the article goes on to say, in fact, in 2020, the per capita murder rates were 40% higher in states won by Donald Trump than those won by Joe Biden. In 2020, the per capita, CAPITA, per capita murder rates were 40% higher in states won by Donald Trump than states won by Joe Biden, according to Washington think tank Third Way, WAY. In 8 of the 10 states with the highest murder rates in the year 2020, Americans voted for the Republican presidential nominee in every election this century. In 8 of the 10 states with the highest murder rates in 2020, Americans voted for Republican presidential nominees in every election this century. The problem is that reducing murder rates is not about pointing a finger at others, avoiding the problem by putting your head in the sand, but rather accepting responsibility for the problem and resolving it. Fox News continuously posts headlines claiming that all-time high murder rates are a Democratic problem because Democrats are soft on crime. As Fox News puts it, police reform is responsible for the rise in murder in Democratic strongholds like New York City, Los Angeles, California, Chicago, Baltimore, Philadelphia, and Minneapolis. But the devil is in the details. it turns out that murder rates are far higher in Donald Trump voting Republican states than Joe Biden voting Democratic states. It turns out that murder rates are far higher in Donald Trump voting Republican states than Joe Biden voting Democratic states. This is also true of Republican cities with Republican mayors, such as Jacksonville, Florida. Interestingly, the murder rate in Democratic Speaker Nancy Pelosi's San Francisco is half the murder rate of House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy's Bakersfield, California. And Bakersfield, California voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump and also has a Republican mayor. Democrat Pelosi's district is half the murder rate of Republican Kevin McCarthy's district. Comparing murder rates for all 50 states clearly shows that the Republican narrative that Democrats are soft on crime begs to be debunked. The point is that Republican office holders and their supporters would seem to be doing a better job of blaming Democrats for crime than actually in reducing the crime rate. Okay, Republican office holders and their supporters it seems that they're actually doing a better job of blaming Democrats for crime than actually in reducing the crime rate. According to Fox News, murder rates are skyrocketing in New York and California and Illinois, yet these three states are not even within the top 10 crime-ridden states. And you should note that of the 10 states with the highest murder rates, 8 of those 10 states voted for Donald Trump in 2020, and none have supported a Democrat for president since 1996. Okay, 8 of the 10 states with the highest murder rates in the country voted for Donald Trump in 2020, and none have supported a Democrat for president since 1996. These are the top 10 most crime-ridden states based on murders per 100,000 residents. That's per capita. So they're looking at per 100,000 residents. Okay, crimes per. So this is looking specifically at murders per 100,000 residents. Number 1 is Mississippi, 2 Louisiana, Kentucky is number 3, Alabama number 4, Missouri's number 5, South Carolina 6, New Mexico 7, Georgia is 8, Arkansas 9, Tennessee 10. Basically, all these are in the South. Only number 7, New Mexico, and number 8, Georgia, voted for Joe Biden. The remaining 8 states are solidly Republican states and voted for Donald Trump. Of states voting Democratic, New York, California, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Illinois are on par with the national crime average. Mississippi's murder rate is 4 times the murder rate of the state of New York and 2.5 times the murder rate of the state of California. That's looking at how many murders per 100,000 people in those states. Okay, it's not looking at the total number of murders. It's looking at per capita, how many murders per 100,000 people. Mississippi's murder rate per 100,000 people is 4 times greater than the murder rate in the state of New York and 2.5 times greater than the murder rate in the state of California. The 5 states with the highest murder rates are all Republican states and Trump voting states. Read the rest of this article here. See, this is totally contrary to the ads that Republicans are running, talking about crime, and they don't have real policies to deal with the rising crime, especially in their Republican state. They don't have real policies to deal with that. They definitely don't have policies to deal with inflation. Republicans, they definitely don't have policies to deal with inflation. Okay, let's see here. Let me post this link. All right, how y'all like this type of information? Okay, who still needs to register for the online history classes I teach? We teach them normally Tuesdays, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to teach a late class here. We're going to jump in for about a half hour, 45 minutes, and then we'll do some more this weekend. I'm flying to hold on, what is this? Okay, they just said, okay, they're gonna start the Roland Martin broadcast 7 p.m. instead of 6 p.m. on Tuesday. Yeah, they'll do 7 p.m. probably to 1 a.m. Yeah, so because I fly to Washington, D.C. Tuesday morning. All right. So if you like this type of information, you definitely want to register for our online history classes. Okay. This helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, pay the bills, because the two digital platforms that I use to teach these classes, so I have to pay each month for that also. This stuff is not free for me to teach these classes, and it's very time consuming also. But this helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, pay some of the bills. It helps me cover expenses when I have to travel out of state, like going. Let me pull this up. Okay. So Tuesdays, it is from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1968. Let me screen. Stand by. Okay, we should be back. All right, we're back. Okay, here's the link here to register for the classes. So Tuesdays, normally 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I teach from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. We're running late today, so I'm going to jump in and teach it Tuesday class as soon as I finish this broadcast. So right here, from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. Classes on sale, $80, regularly $130. Click right here to register here. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it anytime, even a year from now, 2 years from now. Then on Wednesdays, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I teach from the Civil War. I teach ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. And we deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. Now, we were going to do, I was going to make these 8-week classes, but we're going to end up doing 10 weeks. Okay. All right, Cleo, we got your registration. So thanks for registering for the class, Cleo. And if you want to do the bundle pack, email me through the website, Cleo, and we'll get upgrade to the bundle at a discount. So this one here, we deal with the history. We deal with ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt. We do ancient. We deal with the history, some of the history of the Moors in Europe. We deal with what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place also. You can register for both classes. We have a bundle pack for $130. Click right here, register here for the bundle. You get both classes. That's an over $300 value because it's like about a $360 value because there's going to be some bonus presentations you get from me in digital form that I'm uploading to the platform. And you can use debit card, credit card, click register here. If you've taken any of my online classes in the past, email me at AHNshow at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AHNshow at TheAHNShow, AHNshow at TheAHNShow.com, and you get a 50% discount. Or email us through the website. At the top of the page, just click on Contact the African History Network, or click on Menu. If you're on a smartphone, it'll show up as Menu, and then click on Contact the African History Network. Okay, and you'll get a discount. Okay, so the two different classes that I teach, you can register for those. Appreciate the support. And then let me put up the Cash App information here. Let me just show you this quickly. This is our official Cash App account, $ TheAHNShow, SHOW. Those that follow me, you know that there's some fake African History Network Cash App accounts out there. That's why I created this graphic. I'm trying to get them shut down. I had Cash App open up an investigation some months ago. They're very slow. I just talked to them a couple of weeks ago. They're still doing an investigation. There's like 5 fake African History Network Cash App accounts out there that I've identified, and they've been stealing money from us. So this is our official Cash App account, $TheAHNShow. That's our tag, $TheAHNShow, $TheAHNShow, SHOW. When you go to it, it'll say Michael. And if you click right here on the link, it takes you to our QR code. So you can scan this also right here. This is our official Cash App account, our only Cash App account. Those other ones are fake Cash App accounts. All right. And then we have the link for PayPal also. So let me post this here as well. Okay, so this is the link for the courses. And then also for PayPal and Cash App. Now let's see, if you saw the African History Network show on Sunday, October 30th, we talked about the Midwest Decarbonization conference coming up. And I have my niece Jackson on talking about the conference. And I'm speaking there on Wednesday, November 2nd, 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. and Friday, November 4th, 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. Pull this up. This is for the conference, and a lot of the panel I'm on, we're dealing with reparations and environmental justice. Okay, this is. Let me post the link here, and I'm going to put a link on the website, on our website, the African History Network. I got to get that link up. It's been busy. I've been busy. 2022 Equity Summit. It's a 3-day summit, Wednesday, November 2nd. It's like 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. each day, Wednesday, November 2nd through Friday, November 4th, 2022. Okay. And this is a virtual conference, and it's free to register. The entire conference is free. Let me see here. We scroll down. Understanding narrative and numbers using historical data from Black Bottom Detroit gentrification case. This is the one of the panels I'm on, coming up at 3 p.m. Advancing reparations and building decarbonization. Advancing reparations and building decarbonization. So I'm on this panel. The session will offer attendees an understanding of reparations and how this concept can be applied to energy justice, how implicit bias shows up in environmental climate justice work, and how the potential for community ownership of clean energy. How can utilities repair for utility shutoffs, pipeline bursts, and poor air quality, facilitated by Bernice Jackson. She's the co-director of the Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition, created by Russell Rabb. So I'm one of the panelists. And then I'm speaking on Friday, or I'm on the panel on Friday also. So check this out. I'll post a link here. The website is Midwest Decarb, DE, Midwest DECARB, midwestdecarb.org/summit schedule. midwestdecarb.org/summit or /summit schedule, either one. And let me post a link here. Okay, so it's free to register, and you can watch, from around. All right, let's see. 2022 Equity Summit. This is the, let's see here. Okay, yeah. If you go to midwestdecarb.org/summit, it takes you here. And then you can click on the schedule. This is what I was looking for. Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition 2022 Equity Summit. Wednesday, November 2nd through Friday, November 4th, 22. This year's theme centers around the second principle of Kwanzaa, Kujichagulia. We'll be exploring how we empower communities and collectively move forward in the building decarbonization movement. The 3-day summit will uplift multiple sessions on topics ranging from regulatory engagement to reparations and the land back movement. In an effort to make the summit more accessible, we will be hosting all of the sessions virtually on Zoom, and there will be no cost to attend. Okay, so I'm part of that also. So here, let's see, and let's post this here. There we go. Got that. All right, look, hey, we have to get out of here. Remember, the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's correct wrong behavior. You can join us in class. Now you register for the class. And I teach another one Wednesday after the conference. So Wednesday also 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have the second class. All right, we have to get out of here. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you next time. Peace.